I hope you're doing well and staying strong through quarantine. I wanted to thank you for joining us for yet another one of our Insight Change conversations. Today, we're going to take a little trip to Texas, where there are some big things happening to help shift the Lone Star State blue, not least of which is what's taking place in Texas's 24th Congressional District, which is where we're going to spend some time today with Candace Valenzuela, who is a candidate for U.S. House in that district. Kansas is facing a Democratic primary runoff on July 14th, and I wanted you to get to know her and hear her story so you could understand why we at Insight are so excited about this race and this candidate and why we've decided that she's the candidate to support. I'll tell you a little bit about her, although she's going to share a lot more about her life experience and what her campaign message is all about. Candace is currently serving as a member of the Carrollton-Farmers branch school board. She's actually the first Latina and African-American member to serve on that school board. She's a deeply committed public servant. It's actually something that she grew up surrounded with. She's part of a multi-generational Texas family that has a deep history of military service on both sides. And she is running for Congress to advocate for hardworking families in Texas based on her own lived experience. She's faced and overcome some remarkable hardships, from homelessness, dealing with a pre-existing medical condition, raising a young family, and she wants to make sure that there are policies put in place in Congress that work for more families in Texas like hers. And I've got to tell you, one of the things that's really remarkable about Candace and her campaign is the tremendous spectrum of endorsement and support that she's received, including from Warren Democrats, Bold PAC, Latino Victory Fund, Emily's List, and recently she's the first candidate this cycle to get an endorsement from the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, the Congressional Black Caucus, and the Congressional Asian American Pacific American Caucus together. So this is huge, and I think when you hear more about her and get to know her, you're going to understand what makes her so incredibly special. So let's go and talk to Candace. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is, you've been serving your community on the school board for some time, and for a lot of the reasons that you described from your own personal experience, really understand the value of expanded educational opportunity and quality education. Could you tell us a little bit about what you've accomplished in your time on the school board that you're most proud of?
I'm really proud of a lot of things. I'm very proud of the fact that we were able to put STEM and fine arts academies in our elementary schools. As someone who didn't have access to a solid music education until I was maybe 12 or 13, it is the thrill of my heart to see a bunch of kindergartners, especially as a percussionist, playing the xylophones and doing it far better than I ever did in high school. I'm really happy that those kids have that access. We were able to get rid of the reduced lunch program, and now everybody who needs it is on free lunch. And we were able to raise the rates of pay, not just for our teachers, but also for our food service staff, for our janitorial staff as well, because in a lot of these suburban communities, the school districts tend to be the biggest employers. And if we don't have all of our folks receiving a living wage, then our communities are suffering.
Yep. You alluded to this earlier, but at the moment we are all living through this unprecedented global public health pandemic with the coronavirus. And just based on the conversations you've been having around Texas's 24th congressional district as you're campaigning, I'm curious your perspective on this question, Candace. What do you think is required from elected leaders at this particular moment to keep people across the country and there in your part of Texas safe and healthy?
I think this pandemic has been showing us that we're all in this together when a crisis hits. I think a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us, when we talk about healthcare, we've been talking about it from a very individual perspective. This individual receives the healthcare benefits, and that healthcare maybe helps personally enrich them. This has highlighted that that's not necessarily the case. It's not a personal enrichment to have the access to healthcare. It's public security, it's public safety, it's public health. We're all in this together, and we need the kind of government that is empathetic to that Most of us can't hold ourselves in a place where no one else can touch us. We interact with our food service workers, again, our first responders. We don't live in a vacuum, and we need to be able to have the kind of governance that acknowledges that. Americans have been very vulnerable for a long time, and it's critical that we have the kind of leadership that knows that this isn't just something that will resolve itself and will go back to normal really quickly. We need to do some really vital things that have been long overdue for a long time.
So prepare for a new normal even.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, on a more personal note, something that I really identified with in your experience is that you're also the mom to some young children. And so, not only are you running this campaign for Congress, serving on school board, you're also having to do full-time mom duties amidst all of this. Also, could you share with us some tips or tricks or sort of stress relievers that you and your family are using right now?
As much as possible, we try to make sure we get outside the house safely, particularly with a 4-year-old boy. We try to run around the block. We're lucky enough that everybody parks in the back of their homes here, so we can run up and down our street without a lot of traffic. So just keep moving as much as possible with little ones, and have some compassion for them and yourself. Obviously, they're going through a stressful, somewhat traumatic experience, not being able to see their friends, not being able to see their family. As much as this is our social networks as adults, it's also our kids' social networks. And having a little bit of forgiveness for them and a little forgiveness for ourselves while trying to keep sort of a regular routine is the best course of action.
All right, so Candace, you're running for Congress in Texas's 24th district. Tell us a little bit about this race and this district and what makes it unique.
Texas 24 is a suburban majority minority district in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I like to call it the donut around DFW Airport. It's made up of families that are much like mine, younger. They moved to the suburbs either for the community or for the schools. And it's, again, a majority minority district. It looks a lot like those districts that have been flipping across the country, and it's currently rated a toss-up. The fast-changing demographics allowed the candidate last cycle, that's Jan McDowell, to come within 3 points of flipping the seat, but Beto O'Rourke won this district. And when we sat down and we looked at the demographics, the gap between the two was young Latino families. So I've been building a diverse coalition of support to adapt to the challenges of running in a swing district and now running virtually in a swing district. And I know that a Democrat can win here, and I am that Democrat. So we have a primary runoff election on July 14th. It was supposed to be approximately a month from now, but given the conditions of this pandemic, it was reasonable for Texas to move it down a little. The stakes are incredibly high here. It's an open seat, and the Trump-endorsed candidate is not somebody we want representing us. Her claim to fame was, well, one, being the first mayor in the country to endorse Donald Trump, and two, keeping a young man in police custody for bringing a clock he built to school. So if you remember the clock boy incident, she was a huge contributor to that. Okay. And she was very proud of it. And for her trouble, Trump made her deputy director of HUD not long after that incident. So we, yes, we have a unique situation here. She's her pro life, anti-immigrant, Islamophobic values are bad for this country, and I don't need to say that, but that's where we are, right?
Yep. And so actually, on that note, Candace, yes. I was wondering if you could give us some color on, in the conversations that you're having with voters and folks across your district, what are the issues that are likely to be the most important in the coming months over the course of this campaign? What matters the most to the voters that you're talking to?
Well, survival. Again, even before we had COVID-19, it was about survival. Housing has become unaffordable. Healthcare costs have skyrocketed. Wages have not kept up with the cost of living. And so even people who've worked their whole lives, they may have multiple degrees, you're going to see them back at the food banks. And again, this was before the crisis. A lot of them are definitely there now. I volunteered at my local food bank before getting into the thick of this process quite frequently. And what I noticed, even in the time I was there, is that the cars going into the parking lot were getting nicer and nicer. And I don't think that's a reflection of some sort of moral failing. I think it's a reflection of a structural failing.
Candace, one of the things you alluded to earlier that I was hoping we could take a second for you to explain is that you are in a runoff. Could you help us understand what that means?
Sure. Texas is a runoff state. Because this district looked so competitive, we were a Super Tuesday primary. There were 7 folks on the ballot. 2 of us have advanced. And I am the best shot at beating the self-professed conservative squad member, and again, Trump endorsee Beth Van Dyne. And that's why it's so important to invest in this race right now, because it's not going to be a sure bet that any Democrat can emerge from this primary and win. If that were the case, this seat would have been taken last cycle. I'm the only one in this race that's that has the coalition to win here, and it's really unique. I haven't seen a lot of this in any campaign, and I'm really proud of it. I've got precinct chairs, local elected officials, local activists, sitting members of Congress like Deb Haaland, Veronica Escobar, Ayanna Pressley. Senator Warren has endorsed Secretary Castro, Emily's List. I'm the first Tri-Caucus endorsee of 2020.
It's huge.
That is huge to me, and it makes my heart so happy. It's not just about having their names, but I've also had their mentorship, their encouragement, and we need a coalition in order to attack the problems that happen after this election. And so we have to be very forward-looking for this, and the earlier we invest, and that they've understood this, right? The earlier we invest, the better off we'll be going forward in 2021 and hitting the ground running.
Great. Something that impressed me in my conversations with your campaign team is actually the way in which you've got a really nimble campaign team that's thinking outside the box, and that has actually put you in a relatively nimble and ready to respond position as the pandemic has played out. You've got a district that covers a pretty sizable geographic expanse, but maybe tell us a little bit about how you all are campaigning in the time of the coronavirus. What does it mean to engage with prospective voters and supporters in your district at this moment?
It's a good mixture of good old-fashioned canvassing and new technological spaces. And so as we've been approaching it, we have a field director and an outreach coordinator, and they're doing exactly what they would have been doing, except online. We don't knock on doors. We have phone banks that meet together virtually. So we either come together on Google Hangouts or here in Zoom, and folks chat with each other as if they were, at the campaign headquarters, and then they go off and they make phone calls. We've had virtual meet and greets, virtual fundraisers, and again, you build them in the exact same way, good old-fashioned elbow grease and making calls and making connections. And having just such a young team has helped them to be nimble with this, because they are digital natives, but they've also have the old-fashioned canvassing experience, and I think that's critical. You can't just throw yourself out there on Twitter and expect people to vote. You have to have a real human touch, and my team has been particularly good about reaching out to folks, seeing what they need, and trying to get them engaged in this process.
Got it. And for those folks that are listening and eager to find ways to help you and be supportive, what would you say to them? What are the best ways that somebody can help you be successful in your bid for this really important seat?
You can contribute to the race. It would make a huge difference in being able to reach more folks. Obviously, we're going to be completely digital in our engagement again. That means digital ads. That might even mean television buys. We're going to have to reach folks in their homes as much as possible and in many different ways. Not everyone's going to engage with Facebook or Twitter or even our email. So we need to be able to get to them where they are. If you have time or capacity. Also, volunteering is incredibly possible right now, given that geography has condensed in this situation.
Well, Candace, I'm really proud of you for stepping into the arena and running in this way, and really grateful to you for doing the hard work. So thank you so much, and for taking the time to talk to us today.